So Jared Gordon, of course, was on the wrong end or the tough end of a very controversial unanimous decision last weekend, UFC 282, against Paddy Pimblett. Some are saying the biggest robbery of all time. We didn't
Yeah.
necessarily go that far,
Yeah.
but we both said the R word on the show. We
Mhm.
said robbery, so that is forever.
Oh yeah, it's out there now. Yeah.
Once it's said on the podcast, you can't take it back.
Yeah.
Barstool will probably never hire us because of that, but
That's true.
we just have to accept that.
Yeah.
So Jared Gordon, funny enough, goes on Twitter. This actually happened, I think, last night from when we're recording.
Uh-huh.
And he issued a challenge to Patty. He said, "Look, I have no issue with you. Of course, these two do have some history of rolling together. That was kind of a source of tension because Patty said he made him tap, I think, and
Mhm.
Jared denied that. But, anyways, he said, I have no ill will towards you, but I'd love to fight you again, this time in London. And maybe us and Barstool can team up and do some really good work for a lot of people because Patty had said after the fight last weekend that he wanted to work with Jared on some of the charities he works with and stuff. Jared's got a great heart. He
Yeah.
works a lot. He tries to give back a lot to the community and to a lot of less fortunate people. He comes from a tough,
Yes.
tough, life where he really had to clean himself up and
Mhm.
scratch and claw for every opportunity. So I respect a lot that that's kind of the direction Patty went and stuff, regardless of how I think the fight itself went.
Yeah.
But this was interesting. Dave Portnoy even responded and said that he would love to do that, and that he would. He said he would still root for Patty
Yeah.
to beat the shit out of him a second time or whatever he said. But Patty, no comment up to this point.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Patty after the fight said that he thought something was fucked up with his foot. He kept saying that over and over again in the post-fight press conference because people were asking him, of course, about the London card, if he would fight there, who he'd fight next, and he kept saying, "My foot doesn't feel right. I need to get that checked out first." So, Dom, let's say that the foot comes back to where he'd be okay. Let's say he's going to be fighting on the London card,
Mhm.
regardless of the opponent. If you were to be in the shoes in that war room with Dana White and the boys,
Mm.
are you pushing for Paddy Pimblett to fight Jared Gordon again?
Ooh, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, I like the way you kind of put me in that situation. I probably would still say no because I just don't think if you're the boys, right, in the war room, do you think that people in the community are clamoring for that fight again? Because, I mean, let's be honest here. The fight in itself, regardless of what the scorecards were or not, was a very dull fight for the most part, right? A couple
Wow.
big shots, here and there in rounds 1 and 2. Round 3 was a bit of a dud. I don't think there's any pros necessarily in it for the UFC as a company. Let's just kind of go back and forth here. Let's kind of talk through this together here.
So I guess I liked the Paddy Gordon fight a little bit more. Round 3, I'll give you.
Yeah.
One of the worst rounds of the year, maybe. But
Yeah.
rounds 1 and 2, I think were pretty active and pretty exciting, especially when you saw the kind of success that Jared Gordon was
Yeah.
having. That definitely kind of piqued the interest a little more. Like, whoa, is he really gonna
Right.
kind of shock everybody here? I'm actually going to go the opposite of you. I think that this is the best decision for the UFC to make. Now, the big reason for that is because everybody has talked about this fight over the last week.
That's true.
Everybody. They
Yeah.
have talked about the decision, how it was a robbery. Patty even, unbeknownst to himself, I guess, even leaned into it by saying the fight wasn't close.
Yeah.
He's pissed off that people are saying that he lost and all this stuff. So it was someone I think put this on Twitter. It was like his villain origin story was
Yes.
this past weekend, and that's very much true. Kind of like how Hamzat
Yep.
was at UFC 279 a little bit, almost like a phoenix from the fire, just born. But I think it's the right move because Jared Gordon, he's sort of the guy just here, right? He's the opponent, but now he's a sympathetic figure. Not only you can really talk about this guy's backstory what he's had to fight through, get through to get to this point. And then he was so close to on the biggest stage getting one from the UFC's, future, the guy that they're really building up, and it was taken from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then for Paddy, this is a chance to get that monkey off the back. Show that was a fluke. If your foot hadn't been compromised, you would have finished him in that fight and really earn that win,
Yeah.
And it's in London, so obviously no matter who you put against Paddy in London, it's going to be a big hit no matter what. But I also am definitely liking the Barstool inclusion and what they can potentially all work together to do for some of these charities that Jared Gordon worked for. But even if I just were to look at this as from a UFC perspective, I think that's the best decision to make, because the other option is to either give Paddy an opponent that is somewhat similar to Gordon, but not Gordon.
Yeah.
Or you give him a step up and potentially push him in the top 20, top 15 territory. I think the latter is a huge risk considering how he looked in the fight against Gordon. And I think the former is somewhat of a risk too, because if you put him up against just some guy who maybe hardly anybody knows and he loses, then, it'd be a bit of like what would have happened if he had just lost to Jared Gordon, where it's kind of like a wet fart in church. It's like, well, that hurts the star power a little bit. But if you do Jared Gordon again, I think that due to all the controversy with that fight, all of a sudden that's been somehow lifted to mean a little bit more. I think there's a bigger platform for that fight now. I think it's a bigger fight now, and even Jared Gordon himself is a guy that a lot of people are kind of becoming familiar with because they think he got screwed.
Yeah, and I feel like, and again, we're kind of talking from a company perspective here. If they do run this back, you got to think of it in kind of two ways. So if Paddy wins, and I would think, regardless of if it's a decision or not, surely the second fight would be more decisive. I would surely hope so anyways. Say Paddy were to win via finish or just a dominant decision or something, then they bury the hatchet. That rivalry can kind of go by the wayside. Paddy can take that next step. If Paddy loses to Jared Gordon, it's like, all right, well, maybe a future cash cow did just lose, but he's losing to someone that there's already a built-in storyline with. So you can kind of work with Gordon, and it's better for him to lose to Gordon than to some guy on the same level of Gordon, or to push Paddy and lose.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And I would say if Gordon were to win the second fight, all of a sudden you have a trilogy, and maybe you make that a fight night headliner.
That's
and I know people, and I know like a lot of people are probably going to like think that's dumb. There's not enough hype to that fight. It's not a big enough fight.
Oh.
But you have to recognize Paddy, as big as he is already, this would be the perfect solution to what the UFC is going to have a problem.
Yes.
And the problem is that Paddy's star power has surpassed his talent at this point.
Yes.
So he can still get better because he's only 27, 28.
Yep.
So you really don't hit that peak prime until you're at least 30 years old.
Yeah.
So Paddy would have time to keep honing those skills, getting better, gaining some fight years, some of that IQ, getting a little smarter, whatever. And you just have him fighting Jared Gordon
exactly.
the same guy 3 times. And it would just be like almost like his first big rivalry. It'd be kind of unorthodox, unprecedented, but I think it would work out in the UFC's favor. You even get a fight night headliner out of it in the third fight or whatever.
Yes. It would be one of the most unexpected trilogies in UFC history. It's crazy though, guys. Like really, you have to think put yourself in the UFC shoes. This fight had to open their eyes, regardless of all the controversy. They know now what they're working with, complete skill set wise, and they know all of the talent that they have in the lightweight division. Because we're talking, I mean, let's be honest here, Noah. A step up for Paddy from Gordon is competition like, what are we seeing this weekend? Drew Dober and Bobby Green fighting each other. That's the type of territory. And if you throw Paddy in against either of those two, I don't know how that goes for Paddy. I don't think it goes well if I had to put my money where my mouth was. So the UFC has to be very deliberate with their future cash cow here.
I agree. And the more I talked about it, the more I've talked myself into it. So
I think didn't I just do the same? I guess because
Yeah,
I
so,
started on the other side. But
I guess if I had to ask you one more question before we go, and just a simple yes or no, we won't even go into detail. As you sit here today, and let's assume that the foot's not an issue, okay? Would Paddy take that fight?
would he take it? Like, as in that's the fight he's going to do?
If that's
next,
the
or you
fight
mean
that the
take it as in
UFC,
win the fight?
Sorry, I meant if the UFC were to offer that
Okay,
fight, do you
so
think
accept
that's
the
the
fight.
fight that he wants?
I don't. Ooh, you said yes or no. Damn it. I think I'll say yes. I think he will. Yeah.
I'm gonna say yes, but he'd be reluctant. I know. I kind of went against my own rule there.
I don't think it's the fight that he wants, but I think he would
No.
realize it's the
I think
fight that he should.
I think it partially piss him off because he was like, I didn't think it was close. I don't know why I should have to fight this guy again. But I think he seems to be really wanting to gain favor with the UFC. You know, you look at the podcast with him and Dana. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as some people call him like a bootlicker and all this stuff.
No.
I mean, come on, guys. Like, you know, he works with Dana, like whatever. They're palling it up. I'm not saying he should have went after Ariel. That was all kind of but whatever. But it was pretty clear that he wants to like be friendly with the UFC brass because he knows how that can benefit him.
Yes.
Guys like Conor McGregor and Chuck Liddell before him were really tight with Dana, and that, of course, that helped. Didn't hurt. You know, not that it's the end all be all. I mean, Tito Ortiz had a pretty good career, and him and Dana were supposed to box at one point. They hated each other so much.
Right.
But it definitely helps to be friendly with those guys. So I think he would do it if that's what they wanted him to do. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I like it. I agree.
Let's get on to the